All right, we're going to get started here, everybody.
Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining our 360 series panel discussion. We're really happy to be here. I'm Stu Steinberg, local CPA here in Newburyport. And I had an idea to bring together local business owners. You know, I've been working with small business owners and entrepreneurs for 30 years. I love the American ingenuity. I love how business owners can change on the fly and how they adapt. And what better time now than talking about this in the age of COVID. We had a session last week with service experts in the mortgage field, real estate, and legal field, and that worked out real well. Next week, we're going to talk to leaders about how to lead in the time of COVID. It's a real challenging time for leaders. But now, of course, in our second session here, we have a great panel of local small business owners, super savvy, eclectic, really forward-thinking. First, I'd like to introduce Zach Field. Zach owns the drum and music studio here in town in Newburyport and Amesbury. And he's connected with over 30 teachers, teaching everything from drums to anything, right, Zach? So thanks for being here. Just give a quick hello. You're there, right? There you are. Nancy Batista Caswell. She's a restaurateur here in Newburyport with 2 restaurants here in town, as well as Oak and Rowan in Boston. And we're super glad to have Nancy here. Kim Lively, of course, has owned multiple stores here in Newburyport. She owns Edit right now, as well as Meraki, and has had other stores here. Love the entrepreneurial spirit. And of course, Jeremy and Angela Kirkpatrick, I think 18 years here in Newburyport, owning the Grand Trunk. All different kinds of business owners, and really wanted to get a feel for the panel really right out of the gate. What are some of the ways this pandemic, and everybody just chime in, raise your hand here. How have you propelled your business? What have you done in the short term right away? If we could all chip in and say what you've done. What I know in my field, very easy for me to pivot. I've had a virtual office and a paperless digital office for about 15 years probably. So we just continue to do that to provide our clients. But Jeremy, why don't you guys kick off? What have you guys done to make people feel safe right out of the gate? Jeremy, can you hear? Are you okay? Can anybody hear?
Well, right out of the gate, we controlled our. Oh, can you hear us?
Yep.
So we stopped having customers and employees in our store to control the environment. It's just Jeremy and I. It's been Jeremy and I 7 days a week for 2 months. People call in their order and they have designated time frame to pick it up in the afternoon, or we deliver for free in the Newburyport area and a small fee outside of the Newburyport area. And it's been working well. We're thankful.
I think the other component we've added was doing some online demos. I've been doing some cooking and even opening bottles of wine and describing things, because at this time, so many people are engaged on social media and they want an outlet to learn and just see what we're all doing. So that's been kind of a fun way of engaging with our customers and making people feel good and stuff like that.
It's something we've wanted to do, but it's hard to carve out time to do those things. But now there's time, so we're able to start working on those. But it's challenging. We have a lot more work to do, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Kim, and you, I know you have 2 different stores, so what have you done right out of the gate to make that happen?
Well, out of the gate, I had to start to manage the inventory that was coming in, because it was our season to be getting everything in for upcoming spring and summer. So right away, I started managing that, canceling orders, delaying orders. We closed the store and just put all of our efforts into pivoting to the online business, which is a completely new business for us, and we've been doing curbside pickup and free delivery to Newburyport, just trying to maintain as much business as we can in connection with our customers. And then we really just focused on that being cozy at home concept that everyone need right now. So we just changed our feeling from working out to staying at home and being cozy.
No, Nancy, you said tomorrow you're selling so many burgers, come and pick up the burgers. You've pivoted incredibly with all three of your restaurants under different rules and regulations with Boston and Newburyport. And so out of the gate, what have you done to make that happen?
Well, some of the things that we did specifically when it comes to just servicing the community was trying to give people enough variety of something. And personally, what I've been concerned with is just making sure that from the get-go when we opened, we were offering something that somebody else wasn't offering. And so if there was a restaurant that was open in town already, like Loretta or like Bob's Lobster down on Palm Island, I didn't want to offer something that they were doing in an effort to just not affect them. So if somebody wanted a lobster roll, they could in fact just go to Bob's. And if they wanted a meal from Loretta specifically, they would do that. So we started in Newburyport just doing very concept-driven menus. So knowing that, Brian and food wouldn't necessarily travel very well to people's homes. So we started doing this kind of concept-themed menu every week. And that's been working. Of course, we're trying to create the experience of somebody eating our food now in their own home versus having it in our restaurant. And that definitely looks like what will happen in the foreseeable future. And then we established our schedules based on the idea of contact tracing. So there are scheduled hours, and with these employees work solely with the people that they work with on a given week. And that will help us if in fact somebody were to contract the virus, understand who they worked with and at what period of time they did work with them. So like in my Boston restaurant, my pastry team comes in at 7 in the morning and they leave at roughly about 1, and then there's no cross between our PM people coming in at 2 and they work until 8 or 9. And so that helps us just kind of pay attention to how many people are in the building, as well as just who interacts with who.
Right, so that's great, right? Like I said, right out of the gate, that you've done these things. I mean, to me, as a consumer, it's going to be how we make everybody feel more comfortable being in our establishments. And the story that Zach has about his service business for COVID, what happened is it's an interesting one. Zach, if you want to kind of paraphrase, give us a quick story of what you've done right out of the gate here to combat COVID, because obviously people can't come in and share drumsticks and breathe all over each other in the drum studio.
Yeah, exactly. We ended up closing down for about 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, we came up with a new plan and got all of our roughly 30 or so teachers ready to go to do Skype lessons, trial and error, and got everybody all set up. And then we been up and running with about 75% of our clients still taking private lessons with us. And we're actually getting some new students from it. So numbers are down, but we're in much better shape than I thought. And we've learned a lot with the Skype lessons, as far as we've created Google Drives that have material on them that we can screen share with our students and drop them into conversations. It's, changed our teaching style a lot. And I think a lot of us were slightly hesitant about it, but we really don't have a choice now. And it's actually been really great for us and the students.
It's been neat as a service business to be able to pivot in that way, where you can have these online chats and have them be real useful, whether they're in the tax financial planning field or drum lessons. And other businesses like Nancy's, and Nancy was saying social media, I'm really pounding social media and websites for Kim and Jeremy. We're all trying to sort of pivot and make it happen. Can we talk briefly about, let's just pivot on our own here. The loans, did everybody apply for PPP? Can we give a quick synopsis? I know that all business owners, I hope you did at least apply for PPP, or if you were really hurt, the PUA, the Pandemic Unemployment Act. So it's okay to say as much as you want to, but tell your quick story about applying for the loan and working with your local bank and getting it done, just to cover you for this 2-month period, which is obviously a real tough time in your businesses. Kim, you want to share first? Anybody? Nancy? Sure.
Sure. I applied through the Provident. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, yep.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. I applied through the Provident Bank, and they were not able to handle they weren't able to handle the capacity, and so they kind of put me off to an online service, which eventually ended up coming through for me recently. It was very difficult, and it was hard not having a point person, but that did work out. I'm a little nervous about what it's going to mean, because you take it out realizing that you may or may not have to pay it back, and it's been a challenge to try to maintain payroll when you don't have a business to run. So I'm hoping that more clarity will come down through the SBA and whoever else is in charge of it, because right now it doesn't feel very clear as to what's going to happen.
And thanks, Kim, for sharing, obviously. Nancy, you're covering a lot of employees, so you did for your restaurants as well, correct?
I did, yeah, and that's the uncertainty, of course, as everybody is experiencing right now, is just like the unknown of what the relief will be, and ultimately, I think the biggest thing about running our business is we're certainly learning a lot about things that we normally wouldn't be privy to, like the PPP thing for me. I certainly leave that with our accounting team and our financial guys, because it's a lot to take in and the rules are changing all the time. So one of the things that has been challenging for me is really just staying on top of things that I'm learning about as I go, and not necessarily something that I'm doing all the time. So the PPP piece was certainly overwhelming, and it's not necessarily it wasn't necessarily the easiest process for us with a local bank. We switched to another bank that worked through for us very well. The institution, they were rock stars for us, and super thankful. But yeah, it's just a holding pattern and seeing how this affects restaurants and every industry. But for restaurants, we're not there for phase 3, if that's what we're considered for opening, and that's far past what they're looking for a plan for payroll.
Right. That's the big problem. I mean, we talked about that yesterday. If you want to share that story, your thought about restaurants, the pivot, this is a key week, whether, why don't you explain it? You were talking yesterday about that, whether they're going to survive in the next 6 months, what they should do at this pivotal time. A little slow on the connection here. Got that, Nancy?
Yeah, I think the challenging piece, right, is, we're all for the phases to happen from Governor Baker, and obviously, yeah, I got it. Do you got me?
Yep, go ahead.
No?
Yep.
You got me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So the challenging part from a more Boston specific city place, the city, is that obviously the challenges in the city, if you haven't been there, is just basically nobody's really out, and obviously it's a very different style of living. With high rises and young professionals and a lot of empty nesters, I guess, to a certain extent too. So with Boston, what we've really been hoping for is that we get a real plan of what that means for a restaurant reopening, and yeah, we could be a part of phase 1 or phase 2 in a way of outdoor seating or continuing takeout. However, there's no money necessarily to be had in takeout, and the grind is all relative. And we're in a holding pattern with bringing people back on, as well as obviously everybody is. And the piece of that is extended because of the unemployment wages and how much people are also making. So the idea of staying home plus their additional stimulus helps them just stay safe and not necessarily want to return in fear of there not being that gratuity piece. So on the Mass Restaurant United, idea, our plan is to basically say, great, give us phase 1, but for only phase 3, that puts us somewhere in June. We really need to know what's going to happen in 6, 8, 10 months, because that's going to determine if we're going to incur more debt. That's going to determine whether or not deferment is really an ideal situation. I mean, as we're staying open and some of us are just incurring the debt of takeout, we're having those tough conversations with our landlords, and we'll ultimately have to make a decision at some point on whether or not the experience we at one place, at point in time created and thought that our business would become is certainly going to have to change a lot. And so I think that in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see a lot of restaurant owners and chef owners really just making the decision on whether or not financially they're going to be able to stay open or if they're going to pull the plug. And that's certainly a challenge that we're all facing right now because like anything, you know, there's cooking fatigue and there's dining fatigue and people want to go out, but that's only going to happen for so long. And there's obviously a saturation in our market and people are going to want to try out the new places and all of those things, which ultimately will just affect us and how we can work in you know, a year from now. So we're very conscious of, or I guess we're very demanding and wanting to know what are the phases, what is the certainty, and, you know, are we going to be wishing that we pulled the plug in 6 to 8 months when we had less debt than we would to just hold out and see what happens. There's a lot of variables there.
In other words, don't want to chase bad money further down the table if it's not going to happen. I mean, I'm talking with customers, clients like that all the time. It's been a long winter, as you can imagine, trying to just console people and plan with people and try to get people to think beyond this pandemic, which is real and obviously affecting all walks of life, all shapes and sizes. I don't care if you're 10 or 100 or you make 10 grand or 10 million, everybody's being affected. The rich folks who own businesses found out pretty quickly that they can't make their money if people aren't buying their products. So, you know, that's a real big thing. And of course, so I guess, Kim, you had mentioned just a second ago about not feeling like there's any real direction in this. And of course, you know, the federal level and then the governors and then the mayors and everybody has all different ideas. And so in a bit, we'll get to what we want to do as business owners here in Newburyport, which obviously translates, you know, all across the small business, small cities, all across the country, really. But I wanted to just share a couple things. I do feel a little bit better that it's being handled as well as it can be from a medical, from a health and a wealth perspective here in Massachusetts. I've been fortunate to be on the conference calls the last number of weeks with the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, Mike Keneally, and his staff, and they've put together a great an hour-long conference every Friday where they just really fill us in as Mass residents of what's going on. And it's really with all the chambers of commerce all across the state. Karen Polito was on Friday afternoon. She wants us to remain socially distant. Obviously, testing and tracing, they're working. Massachusetts is really at the forefront here of testing and tracing. They've hired close to 2,000 tracers. So as a consumer, that makes me feel more comfortable going into the Grand Trunk or to edit, you know, knowing that people are being traced and they're pulled out, obviously, if they're sick. And number 3, what Karen said, masks work. So I know some people don't really want to hear that, but they do work. So try to use them in public. That's what they're saying here, at least in Massachusetts. You know, the PPP round 1 got used up by the big people and the big banks. Round 2 did slip through more to the smaller loans, which are more of us, the bedrock of our country. The average loan in round 1 went from about $275,000 to $75,000 to show that the smaller banks are helping out the smaller consumers. You know, all of us in service and business, most of my clients have applied for one of these kind of loans. So that's really good. We can talk about the legality of it and whether it's taxable and paybackable. We can talk about that on an individual basis because there's lots of rules and regulations there. But I can promise you one thing, that they're going to change every hour of every day. And so as they apply to your business, make sure you talk to your advisors, you know, when needed. Does that make sense to you guys as panelists too as well? Do you feel like everything's changing so fast that you don't even know how to react sometimes? Right.
Yeah.
So the question would become, okay, what, you know, opportunities can arise from challenges? Like, obviously, Zach, you've used Skype. Kim, you can't use Skype, but what's going to happen in retail? Is there going to be, what opportunity is going to come? Are you going to have reservations to come into your store at the Grand Trunk or to edit? Kim, what do you think?
Already we do private shopping at Edit, so I will continue to do that, but also, you know, find new ways of doing it to keep everyone safe and also just keep in business. I really enjoy that private shopping, and people do too, but I think it'll be even more enjoyable for people when they can just be one-on-one in a shopping environment and have, you know, an expert and consultant at your disposal. So I think that's going to be a fun pivot. And then Meraki, the same thing, will allow for and set up appointments. We're not going to open right away. We'll open with only, you know, shorter hours, less days, and then keep time available for private shopping appointments. So that's, you know, a couple of the things that we'll be doing.
What else in retail on a macro level? Like, you know, I know we're all in this together. So other stores, if you're doing something, obviously they're going to take directive, and they should all be doing the same thing up and down State Street and in every State Street in America, I suppose, right? Or except for that one street that's halfway between Virginia and Tennessee. Did you hear about that? One street has, you can eat in the restaurant. One street, Bob's Burgers. In Virginia, you can only do takeout. So depending on what side of the street you're on. I hope that doesn't happen in Newburyport, but at least it's only one state, obviously. We've all talked about feeling like we're a few weeks behind. When do you think we'll catch up? Or are we just going to be more smart about this and it's going to take us longer to catch up? Anybody can chime in there.
I think that it's going to be really hard to determine where people are at. You know, I think that at the end of the day, you know, people want to get to some form of normal, but I think that they also need to know how to trust us, and we need to be more present than ever. And I think trying to share the way that we're going to be as safe for them to come in, whether it is retail or restaurant. Like I said, I think we're going to have to create a new experience and hope that they feel comfortable in it, and slowly have that word of mouth continue so people feel good about coming out. I mean, some of my closest friends have said they still don't feel comfortable coming out, and they know how I operate, right? And so I can't relate to certain people that are concerned and really worried. I understand that they could be paralyzed with fear, and I certainly respect that. And so it's always, you know, seeing how many people are walking up State Street and, you know, grabbing a breakfast sandwich from us. It seems very 50-50 on whether or not people are willing to get back to their normal, or whether or not people are scared. You know, there's times when I even get 1 or 2 hate mail messages, responses to my emails, because people are upset that I'm open and offering that to that experience for somebody to get out of their house, and they'd rather them stay home, you know? So there's definitely a lot of uncertainty in how we do. And I think that as much as we want to be consistent, which is always the #1 goal in restaurants, but also I think in your business, you know, having the same experience and trying to build that consistent repertoire with your, you know, clients or guests or whatever. Like, I think the challenge is that it's always going to be pivoting. You know, we can only put so many signs up to tell people what to do. But at the same point, it's going to be changing, I think, pretty often, especially in my industry, you know.
Yeah, yours is definitely going to change a lot. Angela, like you guys, I'm sure it'll be a hybrid going forward in your type of store, you know, wine, cheese, and European.
Yeah, people
favorites.
are, there's a lot of fear 2 months ago, but I think 90% of our customers are picking up curbside now. They used to say, no, I'm not coming out of my house, leave it on the porch, I'll wave to you, I'll call to you. But now it's getting people are getting a lot more comfortable. They're demanding, they're like, no, I want to come out, I want to get out of the house, I want to drive by and pick up. Granted, nothing's really open on our street, which is unfortunate for those businesses, but there's parking for people to pull right up. That won't be the case in the summertime once everything's lifted and everyone's open. I don't know how curbside will work so efficiently at that point. We'll have to cross that challenge when it comes, but right now it's pretty stable. And people can call us on our cell phone, and they do, like 8 a.m. to 6, 7 o'clock at night, because the phone goes right into our home cell phones. So we talk to people all day long. People will, Jeremy's got his clientele, his wine clientele. They say, I'm picking up at Saya, I need a bottle of this or that, or Loretta's or wherever, even pizza, and then they'll swoop by. So we're constantly busy. We're lucky to have that interaction with our customers still on the phone. And we love it. That's why we do what we do, just to have that community and relationship with our customers. We'll never give that up. So online, we want to have it more efficient online, but we also want to still have the phone lines open 24/7, not 24/7, but have that open communication.
So
Do you want to say
Zach,
something?
No.
oh yeah, okay, over to Zach now, because I know like how, I'm sure, when you first thought that you could try to pull this off online, you're like, this is, but I'm sure after 1 week of parents trying to take care of their kids at home, they were jumping into lessons as quickly as they could, right? So
Yeah.
you foresee a future where you had mentioned when we were chatting yesterday, I think it was like even on snow days, there's no reason to cancel your appointment with your drum teacher or your music teacher, because you can just jump right online.
Yeah,
Right?
definitely. I know right away when we were suggesting the Skype lessons, a lot of people right away were like, nope, not going to do it. We're not interested. And then when they realized, all right, this is going to be how it is for a while, we kind of had some more people trickling in who said, you know what, like, no. So they're in, and even this morning I sent an email out to the office crew, because we're trying to, we're approaching our summer scheduling, which changes a little bit, but it's impossible to know what the plan is going to be in June or July or August. So we can't really say, here's what's happening. So we're trying to word everything the best way we can, but we also there's no predicting. So at least we have the Skype lessons. And if we have to, if we have to do Skype lessons all summer, I mean, we'll do it. I mean, it's all going to depend on, the governor or anybody can say, all right, you're ready to open, but it depends on what the clients want to do. I mean, at any given time, we could have, we'll have 10 teachers, and on the half hour, parents and students coming in, we could have 30, 40 or so people in a waiting room, crossing each other. And people aren't going to like that right away. So we're just going to roll with it as is and see how things play out. And, in the future, the Skype lessons are huge. We had a teacher who said that, she's going to have knee surgery this summer. And we're like, hey, when I'm recovering, can I do Skype lessons? Or, like you mentioned, snow day. Usually that would be a total loss for everybody. We'd have to do some lessons on Skype via snow day, or somebody's traveling for the summer. Maybe their kid wants to do some ukulele at the campground.
No, it's totally.
True.
That's what I love, because the ingenuity allows you to be able to do that. And why not take advantage of the technology?
It's not ideal. Like, none of this is ideal. And the big thing, like, as Nancy says, or Kim says, everybody's saying, our whole thing with all of our business, what we have in common is we love the interaction with our clients, whether it's, my one-on-one lessons with my students, where a lot of times it's not even about music, it's about life, or they're coming in with, having a bad day, and we get to talk about it. And that is what I am missing so much, and I know the kids are too. However, this is second best. We're still able to get a lot done. So I don't know. I just cannot wait to see everybody and to be everybody. And I'm going to hug everybody. So I'm sorry, but
Good job. That's great, Zach. That's great. Let me answer. There's a couple of questions here. So there's a question from, as an HR consultant, I'm seeing a huge difference in whether employees want to come back to work when we can, depending on how well their owners and leaders have made them feel valued and connected during this time. How are we going to make people feel valued and connected to our employees going forward? I can't imagine any of us would have problems with that. But are there any particular things that, I think Nancy had mentioned, testing and tracing, or really trying to hone in on your employees to be so careful right now?
Yeah, I can certainly speak to the challenges ahead of us. Everybody's been super gracious, and there's a common understanding of what's happening, and so as a tipped employee, I think people have a lot of concerns about, okay, well, how can I make money? And then the end result is, am I putting myself in danger and potentially not making money and going home and not being able to support my family. And once I come off this claim, how does that affect me? And what does that mean, right? And obviously the mass unemployment offices have extended their volunteers to like 1,000 people now, and they're getting back to people that are having issues with claims, which is good, but as opposed to the first couple weeks. But obviously those things are concerning. And I think that if we take the platform that we have right now and we start thinking about our industry on a whole, I think that this is going to be the opportunity where we start making some changes as well that could benefit everybody involved in my industry, and does it become this, almost fixed cost idea that, restaurants like Danny Meyer's have started to establish, where they're non-tipped employees, and everybody now has this common understanding of, I have, per the new regulations, 1 hour to eat in your restaurant, and so therefore what your labor is in order to get that done, and there's no more gratuity. Now there's just a flat rate of, it's going to cost you X amount for your food and $30 flat rate for just supporting, and ultimately everybody involved gets an hourly rate of, let's say, $20 an hour, putting that out there, right? Because what happens in a restaurant when there's no bar, for example, is that, which is something that there's been conversation about, where nobody can sit at a bar or stand at a bar. And so you're thinking, well, you need a bartender to make a drink. So where does that person get their tip? So there's going to be a lot of, I think, systems that get put in place. I think the concern is going to be that if people have been isolating themselves and been quarantining, they haven't been exposed to a lot that's happening out there. And so that's the biggest challenge, is certainly making people feel comfortable, but also getting them to understand that, we have to move forward in order to have a life after this, right? And it's unfortunate as a business owner to have to put your employees in that position, but you have to think about, like, if you can't comfortably see yourself adjusting and pivoting as well as an employee in a certain industry, then I think you need to have some self-reflection in this time and search for something that's going to be more viable for you. Obviously, none of us can sit here and say that COVID is going to go away. There's a vaccine, great, but how long and how far out is that? And so there's a lot of questions that I think even employees have to ask themselves as they begin to return to work and understand that, it's not going to be the same. And it's going to take a lot of effort in order to reach the same goal that we had succeeded at, 4 months ago.
And this obviously would affect Nancy and everybody as well that has a store. But what about another question, thoughts on the proposed order that's in committee with City Council to close parts of State Street and Pleasant Street to cars? And again, this is happening in communities all over America, I'm sure. Do you want to sort of close off some areas?
Yeah.
As I was walking today, or was last night, right when the rain stopped and then it started again. But I was like, how are they going to do this? Because I think it's a great idea for restaurants.
Want to hear my plan?
Well, yeah, Nancy got a plan. Go. Yes.
Yeah. So my plan is or what I think should potentially happen is, I see State Street. So, okay, so let's discuss waterfront. Waterfront locations, restaurant specific, all have enough of their outdoor setting to be able to hit that 25 to 40% occupancy. Whether it's Michael's utilizing their decks, whether it's part of their parking. The same goes for Black Cow, as well as, what happens with Tuscan Kitchen when they're opening, and Starboard Galley, same thing with Sea Level. So the challenging piece becomes, what is really our downtown? And so there's going to have to be some sacrifice. I personally hope that we can get on board for, because obviously we're going to see these businesses make a really hard decision on whether or not they survive this. And so the only hope we have is to very much support this al fresco opportunity. And so this means the Grog, who doesn't have any outdoor seating currently, and obviously Brine, Paddlin, Saya, and then Agave, which, the 4 or 5 tables that Agave does have, and then you go up to Lexi's and Port Tavern. So my thought process is, we basically come off of Market Square. The left, there's a 2-lane, obviously, and the parking. In a perfect world, there wouldn't be parking on one side of the road, and if at all, maybe no parking on State Street. But what we would do is we would funnel people to one lane. One lane would essentially get people to be able to come off or on State Street. If you think about it, you can take a left off into Market Street. You would you would come off of Essex Street and take a left onto State Street. You would take a left onto Charter Street. So the left lane could be viable to keep State Street still moving. And we would also keep the left side of State Street's sidewalks also open. That would give us a flow of traffic for anybody with any handicap accessibilities or concerns, giving us just this chance to keep some kind of structure and movement going. On the right-hand side, very similar to like anything in Europe or Italy, we would kind of create a piazza dining. That would allow us to hit our occupancy by having either Brine essentially cross this lane to get to the other side of, State Street. Not that this is, challenging, but ultimately there'd be assigned tables there for these restaurants. So, Grog could have that space kind of right between Bank of America to Seabags, and then Brine could own that space right next to the Gen T's, and then Paddle Inn could have the space next to the Salt, and then Say it could have the front space. Agave would extend theirs, and then going further up, we have the space of 7080 State, which we've been discussing giving the viable spaces to Port Tavern and to Lexi's as well for their to have that access. Then what would happen is Loretta's and Oregano's would take over in street. That would have access for them to be able to have outdoor seating there, and the same with Vera and Purple Onion. So hopefully within the budget of the mayor, there's this bike trafficking and just patrol for police patrolling. We would have to have some kind of detail. The detail could hopefully push an understanding of taking into consideration trucks that unload and load, how they wouldn't be able to load and unload on these main streets, and also just keeping traffic flowing. Hopefully it would mean that we would access and use the parking garage appropriately. That could either, make some people upset that they have to park in the parking garage. But I think one of the things I just said before we got started is, we've learned a lot about walking in our community, and that's been one of the nicest things to see, is that we've made this a walking community. And I think that we can continue to see our connection to nature and walk downtown more frequently. But then that would give us the access to either validate, for the retailers downtown. So the loss of parking for them could mean that if somebody parks in the parking garage, it could get potentially validated if you're shopping on State Street shops or something along those lines, because the challenging piece is going to be something that could be good for the restaurants might be a deterrent or difficult for the retailers. But we all need to create some kind of atmosphere downtown. And so ultimately the challenging piece is that State Street, Liberty, and the Pleasant Street. So that would be, in a perfect world for me, how I would see the potential for it to work for us. Of course, taking into consideration rain is always going to be challenging. But that would be the goal, to keep the most affected restaurants. And I hate to say it because we're all affected, I get it, but the downtown waterfront have very different occupancies. So that would keep a Brine alive, that would keep a Paddle alive, that would keep Lexi's alive. And hopefully we don't lose some of the character of what State Street is. Otherwise, we're going to look at a very papered up, conversation. The same for the Whale, and the connection to not having a bar there and having to force more food as well. Not that they don't do food, but you know what I'm saying. So that would be my goal, to work towards something like that and get all the business owners or landlords on State Street to approve something. And we'd have to move relatively quickly to learn how to do that.
Right.
That was a long-winded goal, but that's my goal.
Yeah, and that's our piece. Go ahead, Ange.
Would State Street become no longer one way? So like delivery trucks could go down it and take a left. Is it Prince Place in the back? We get huge trucks from Manhattan and stuff with cheese and
yeah, so
and
I
wine.
think that basically once it hits Lexi's, that could be the place where basically you would take right into Prince Place. Exactly. I think that, in front of the library where that hasn't been a public place, like that.
You mean a left, like go down State? Because if you take a right, I don't know if those trucks can get up one way.
Yeah, so I think it would have to be, once Lexi's ends, there's no need for al fresco dining anymore. So I think people could start taking that right to go to Prince Place, or coming off Harris would be an open lane as you get closer to the lights on High Street. And maybe loading zone could take place in front of like the library area, since there's nobody at the library right now. Just some ideas. I mean, I think that State Street would be very hard to just shut down completely, like something like Burlington, Vermont or whatever. I think that could be very hard, especially with Green Street being a one-way down. But I think that if we could keep it to some flow of traffic, it could be beneficial in order to do something like that. And then the Mall could be something that, the guys at Mr. India use, or Mission Oak could use Brown Square right in front of the City Hall, because that space is just right there for them anyway. I mean, it could be a really nice experience to just be coming down Green Street and seeing Mission, that green space there with some tables and people eating, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the other piece of it is just putting pressure on DPW to keep downtown clean, and what those responsibilities would be on our service staff as well. The wipe down and clean down and breaking down on a nightly basis, and sanitizing accordingly.
Yeah, sanitize heavily, of course, right?
That sounds like a great plan to keep the restaurants alive, I think.
Well,
Especially if we get trolleys coming in, parking in the industrial park, and just make it more foot traffic downtown.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely just creating that downtown feel is going to be important. And people will feel comfortable because they can visually see what people are doing, right? As opposed to like sitting there, even if they were to drive by, to be like, oh my God, I noticed that people were what they were doing, and I saw people with masks, and I did all this. Like, I mean, even with a regular restaurant, when you have it in a normal setting, when you have the patio, the idea is somebody's walking by and seeing really good food on your plate, right? And so the idea is to catch them like that. Yeah. And maybe we can put Zach Fields out on the streets playing some music to create some atmosphere.
Too many. The steel drums will be fine, but too many complaints of the noise, right? The drums are too noisy. So on a related note, they would talk about maybe having, people are afraid to go to gyms and fitness classes. So why don't we allow them to have classes in our open spaces? It's what a great city. We have all these great open spaces. So I hope we'll be able to pivot and allow these people to teach their classes. People are so attached to their sages in this field that it would be a shame to not allow that. Here's another question. Well, one question came in about the EIDL, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loans, and I don't want to talk about that right now in this forum. It's more complicated, but those that applied were eligible for a grant. Some got it, some didn't, but there's a lot in there, so I'll address that off. Here's another one. Does the canceling of Yankee Homecoming change the equation for any of you, and if so, how? I mean, there's people on this call that might know any hear what you have to say. Oh, Zach's raising his hand.
I'll start with this one. This is going to be not people are not going to like what I want to say. Let me first, on the positive, I enjoy Yankee Homecoming because I like to run the race. I like music, things like that. However, for a business standpoint, it gets in our way because we do not get any people wanting to come in lessons. If anything, we have to cancel lessons on the day of the bed race because everybody's parking all around in the tannery and causing all this traffic. So we just have parents constantly irritated with us during the week of Yankee Homecoming because it's gridlock. So I know I sound like a Scrooge, but I'm okay.
I've lived in this town for 17, 18 years, and I've asked all the owners, and some are for it and some are against. So, Kim, what do you think?
I could go on for hours about this, so I need to figure out what I want to say. I guess having more in town, it makes our business better for Yankee Homecoming. But that being said, I think that it's not really serving in the way it should. I think that what we're offering is a little outdated, and it's not being run maybe the way that it could be run to be beneficial to more restaurants and downtown businesses. So I actually welcome the opportunity to change that type of festival to something that's better for everyone. But we have to realize that having more people come to town is, beneficial to a lot of us, or could be really beneficial to a lot of us if done the proper way. So my initial thoughts. I don't want to say much more.
Yeah.
What about you guys at the Grand Trunk? I know you probably have regulars that stay away, but then you have people that come into town. Don't you have a bit of that?
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of people that they're like, nope, we're not coming into town all week.
Everyone leaves town.
Yeah, it's a nightmare to park. You get so many people coming into town, and I definitely agree with Kim. I think this is the type of event that could be so beneficial to everyone, restaurants, retail, you name it. If it's done
On a grassy area off the streets.
But that's a whole other conversation in planning committee. So,
Yeah.
But I think it has so much potential, and I think this is the time to really consider that.
And our kids are disappointed. Like, they just found out it's being canceled. Our 14-year-old's depressed because the kids love going downtown, the music, and it's boys, and they're all checking, they love it. But we can come up with something else, So we're fine. We're good here at the Grand Trunk with that being canceled.
The restaurants must be given, Nancy, what happens with the restaurants usually?
I mean, I've been asking for Yankee Homecoming to reconsider how they do what they do, I think, in my whole existence of like 10 years of operating. I think it's a tradition, and I think people like traditions, of course, but I think for sure it's pivoted, from the McDonald's in the back in street mobile thing that showed up a couple of years ago. But people liked the music and all of that. I think the Saturday of fireworks is the quietest Saturday of my whole fiscal year, because we're just not equipped to have people, and then we just personally shut down and say nobody's allowed downtown because we can't get through or whatever. But I do think that the one thing we can get from this is we can learn that it's okay to, again, as Angela just said, cancel something and also pivot a festival like that, because I think there's something we can take away from it. And there's a lot of energy to do something. Now is the time to say, bow out from a tradition that made sense for so many, and work on something that could be new and fresh and exciting, and put the power towards something like that. But yeah, I don't think, waterfront maybe feels a little different, because the big push is definitely to waterfront restaurants and people surrounding those music concerts, but it's not huge for us.
Well, that makes sense. That does make sense. So we're getting close to the end, but I definitely want to kind of fill in one more thing that's sort of really important. Like what's one thing that we learned from, what's your top lesson that each of us has learned from this experience, and how, again, what in the lesson that we learned, and what's going to help us make our customers ultimately feel more safe coming in our establishments? I know we've sort of talked about it, but let's sort of sum up. Zach, what's one lesson that you've learned?
This is going to be a personal lesson, if that's all right. It's not really, I guess it's business related, but when everything happened, I freaked out, and really freaked out. You work so hard, 20 whatever years on building a business, and it's humming along, and bang, it just crashes to the point where there's not a dime coming in. You have all these people who work for you, and just, big responsibility. And I had a pretty solid breakdown. I mean, men cry, so I shed a few tears. It was like a Tuesday night, and I let it all out, because there was a lot of fear involved, of basically the fear of financial insecurity and fear of what's going to happen in the uncertainty of the future. And then once I let that go, after I shed a few tears, I was like set free the next day, because I realized, at first, and maybe some of you business owners can relate to this, you take it very personal. If your business is doing well, it's like, all right, me and my crew are doing a great job. But for any reason, if the numbers dip or whatever, I take it personally myself, being like, all right, what am I doing wrong? Like I'm not running my business right. And for once, I am able to say, like, all right, these numbers that just went down have nothing to do with me. And so for me, just being able to let go of not feeling totally financially stable, and just really, I keep on having to tell myself, I have to be right now. The second I even start thinking about tomorrow or 3 weeks from right now, I start to panic, and it's just like, I can't do anything about it. It is just, it's out of my hands. So that's what I've learned from this.
Wow, that's great, Zach. How about you, Kim?
Ooh, similar to Zach. I could just take everything he said and say the same thing. But I think learning to let go of fear it was huge for me, and to remember that I'm a businesswoman that can figure stuff out and that can make changes and do the best I possibly can, and I really had to hold on to that and make that happen, and try to take care of my staff and try to take care of my family, and find the balance in all of it, without the fear. Because I think the one thing that as a business owner I've always done since I forget how old I was. I think I was 25 when I opened my first flower shop in Marblehead. Someone told me, I don't remember who it is, but they said, think of the worst case scenario, accept it, and then move on. And that's how you take on risk as a business owner. And that's kind of what I did with this. And I've never had a harder time accepting the worst case scenario, but I did, and move forward. So
that's the Buddha. What's the Buddha say? Is assume that we're all suffering. So if you start from there, it's all going to be much better than there, right? So I guess that's good. That's good as well. And you guys, Jeremy and Angela, is there a lesson that you've learned from this whole crazy scene? And I know you're going to be responsible going forward, but what do we learn from this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the one thing we've learned, and I agree with what Zach and Tim have said, is that this situation has really pushed us to our limits, to our full potential. Like, we really have to work hard. We have to really engage our customers and figure it out. And somehow, whether it's going online, doing Skype, becoming more active on social media, we're just really, really involved with our customers at this point, because without them, we wouldn't exist. And we've learned to become more efficient during this time, believe it or not. Engaging them, but also just setting up certain parameters and just really working hard and getting
taking
stuff done.
a look at our business and figuring out what our customers really, really have wanted and supported over the last 16, 17 years, and just nip-tucking the areas that we have to let go. Lots of things aren't selling because people aren't in the store, so those things are not a priority anymore.
Yeah.
So Grand Trunk is definitely changing a little bit daily.
And then the other one key thing is I've learned that my 14-year-old daughter can cut my hair.
I did see those pictures. I saw
Don't
those.
turn around.
Yeah, I won't turn around.
Nancy, what about one lesson that you've learned?
I mean, I think I could just echo what everybody's already stated for sure. Like the personal piece of adjusting to, the worst case scenarios or just potential of failure, and the reality of what's ahead of us and how to handle adversity. But I guess I just say the same, my big thing is just the relationship piece. It's so important now more than ever to realize, the relationships that you have with people, and whether it's people that have come through your store and supported you, to business relationships that you've gotten into with either your landlord or your banker for the PPP, like all those relationships now more than ever, you realize benefited you or hurt you, and ultimately, paying attention to who you surround yourself you know, with in the future as well, as we continue to create relationships and talk openly about our challenges and feel comfortable speaking about our failures to one another, and really just thinking about, you know, the next couple steps and what to do. I think that's definitely what I've learned as, you know, super important during this time, is to know who you can fall back on and know who you're surrounding yourself with, and hope that, you know, you've got their support for personal reasons, business reasons, and just your own mental health.
That's great. That's great. And the one thing that I've learned, you know, and again, it's been a long winter and I feel privileged I can work to try to help people but I've learned that we really truly are resilient people. At least my client base is, most of which are small business owners from a little tiny little, you know, mom and pop thing out of the house or whatever, to, you know, I focus on smaller businesses, but it could be, you know, a lot of action in that small business. And we're all really very resilient, willing to learn, willing to try to, you know, focus on our businesses and try to do what's right for everybody that's involved. I know with this panel that I put together, we're all going to do our best to make sure people feel safe, and we're going to comply with the laws, and we're going to even probably go beyond that to make sure people feel safe, you know, coming to our businesses, our place of businesses, and we're going to do what's right for the whole community, which could happen in any community. So I do thank all you guys. There's been a lot of great chatter. There's been great questions. I know people have emailed me off-site as well as it's just this, we've really hit on something here where people want to be safe going into these businesses. And I'm glad that you're all taking the precautions to do so. That's really important to me as a consumer. We're a 2/3 driven consumer economy. So if we're not out there buying stuff as individuals at these businesses, then the businesses obviously can't make it. You can reach out to us anytime. You can reach me, Stu, S-T-U, at erocktax.com. And of course, you have all our information. You probably see us all on Facebook or whatever anyway. So if you do have questions, please reach out. Of course, in my field, it's a little more personal, so people don't like to ask questions in a public forum, and that's understood. But again, reach out, and thank you, everybody, for a great chat, and hope I will see you all soon in person.
Thanks, Stu.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stu.
You guys.
Guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.